Today, I bring you a story about James and Deep. Hello everyone. In this episode, James and Deep give John a gift, unexpected, deeply meaningful, and quietly life-changing. It is not a gift wrapped in ribbons or announced with celebration, but one born from understanding, patience, and a shared belief in second chances. The story begins on a morning that appeared utterly ordinary, yet carried emotions so subtle that only those living within them could truly feel their weight. That winter morning, cold air lay heavy over the market, which had not yet fully awakened from the long night before. A pale mist lingered beneath the tarps stretched above the stalls, shimmering faintly under the fragile light of dawn. The ground was damp beneath footstep, and the world felt unusually hushed. Only a handful of early risers passed through, each moving quickly, shoulders drawn tight against the biting cold. At the center of this quiet scene, Deep sat at her familiar stall. Her posture was slightly hunched, her shoulders subtly pulled inward to protect herself from the chill. In front of her rested a small notebook. Its cover was worn, its edges frayed by time and constant use. It was neither new nor beautiful, yet it was the object Deep cherished most. She opened it slowly. Thin pages revealed dense lines of handwritten numbers. Careful, Deep held her pen firmly. Deliberate and personal. The tip hovered over the paper for a long moment before moving. When she began to write, there was no rush. Each number was formed neatly, each stroke measured. She lingered on every line longer than usual, as though making certain that not even the smallest detail escaped her attention. She calculated everything meticulously. She added again. She subtracted. She added. Every expense was clearly recorded: the cost of goods, labor, wages, small incidental costs that accumulated quietly throughout the day. At times, she frowned slightly, rereading the page from the beginning. Then, when the numbers finally aligned, she released a soft breath. That breath carried tension, but also hope. This notebook was not merely a ledger, it was proof of perseverance. It held the memory of countless mornings when she rose before dawn, of long days spent in cold air, of moments when exhaustion pressed heavily on her. Yet she still refused to give up. Deep did not notice that James had arrived. He had been standing beside the stall for some time, watching silently. James did not speak immediately. He simply observed the posture he knew so well. The way Deep leaned over the notebook, her concentration so complete that the world around her seemed to disappear, caused him to pause longer than he had intended. He watched her fingers grip the pen. He watched each line appear on the page, and within him, something stirred, an emotion he could not easily name. Only when James stepped slightly closer, his shadow falling gently across the notebook, did Deep look up in surprise. Her eyes flickered with brief shock, then softened almost instantly when she recognized him. Not broadly, not dramatically, but warmly enough to be felt. James smiled. He asked about her work in a natural, unintrusive way. How was business? Had the morning gone smoothly? His voice remained low and calm. Careful not to disturb the stillness surrounding them, when James asked about profit and loss, Deep hesitated. She glanced back at the notebook, as though gathering certainty before answering. After a quiet breath, she spoke softly. After deducting all expenses, there was still some money left. Her voice held no pride, no sense of boasting. It sounded more like a factual report, a result earned through steady effort. James leaned in to look at the numbers. His gaze lingered, not out of doubt, but because emotion rose unexpectedly within him. Surprise was there, but more than that, quiet pride. He remembered the past. There were days when Deep struggled with every calculation. Afraid of making mistakes, afraid of writing something wrong, days when her hands trembled as she held the notebook. Asking again and again just to be sure. Now, everything was recorded clearly and confidently, a growth born of silent determination. He simply nodded, his eyes lifting from the notebook to meet hers. James said little. The silence between them was not heavy, instead, it spoke louder than any compliment could. Deep smiled faintly and lowered her head. Despite the persistent cold of the morning, warmth spread quietly through her chest. Deep raised her hand to her collar and brushed her lips without thinking. A cold gust of wind passed. James noticed the dryness, the small cracks left by cold air and long hours outdoors. He mentioned it casually, almost as an afterthought. He said her lips were badly chapped and that later he would give her some lip balm he kept in his car. Nothing elaborate, just one simple sentence, yet it carried genuine care. Deep paused when she heard it. She looked at James, then nodded softly. In that cold winter morning, surrounded by unfinished calculations and quiet effort. That small gesture made her feel unexpectedly warm. No dramatic displays. No grand words. Just an ordinary detail, yet enough to push back the cold. Deep closed the notebook carefully and set it aside. James remained standing there, unhurried. The morning continued slowly. The mist still clung to the air, and the world remained quiet. As though the day itself had only just begun, James asked Deep to help clean a car that had been left in storage for a long time. A thin layer of dust coated its surface, making clear it hadn't been touched in weeks. Deep looked at the car briefly, then nodded without hesitation. She rolled up her sleeves, filled an old bucket with water, and dipped a cloth into it. The cold water touched her hands, sending a small shiver through her body, but she didn't stop. She wiped slowly, section by section, with care, as though the task mattered deeply. Dust that had settled for days disappeared gradually under each gentle stroke. She bent closer, switched hands, wrung out the cloth, and cleaned even the hidden corners most people ignored. James stood nearby at first, planning only to watch. Soon, however, he picked up another cloth and joined her. Whoever noticed a spot simply cleaned it. They didn't divide tasks. They talked casually as they worked, light jokes. Nothing serious. Ordinary questions. James shared small stories and Deep listened, smiling softly. There was no modern car wash, no fragrant soap foam, no machines, just a bucket of water, old cloths, and lingering cold. Yet the atmosphere between them was gentle, making the work feel easier than it truly was. When the car was finished, James laughed, joking that it looked cleaner than if they had taken it to a professional car wash. Deep shook her head modestly, saying professionals did a much better job. Still, a quiet smile lingered on her lips. Her happiness came not from praise, but from the simplicity of sharing an ordinary moment without pressure or worry. Later, James invited Deep for coffee. The cafe was small and nearby. Nothing fancy. Wooden tables, simple chairs, and the familiar scent of coffee. Warmth from their cups slowly pushed away the cold. They sat facing each other. Deep lifted her cup, blew gently, then set it down. Her eyes drifted toward the window before she began to speak. She told James about the time when he wasn't there. Her words were slow, unforced. Memories surfaced naturally, fear, uncertainty. Nights spent alone feeling how fragile everything was. There were moments when she doubted whether she could carry everything by herself. In those moments, she thought only of her child. She told herself she was not allowed to collapse. She learned from the smallest things. If she didn't know, she asked. If she wasn't good at something, she practiced. At first, she was shy, awkward with customers, unsure of herself. Some days, she returned home feeling she had achieved nothing. But the next day, she continued. Gradually, she learned to communicate, to stand before others. She trained herself to stay calm, to trust her ability, to make decisions alone. She did not dramatize her hardship. Her voice was steady. James listened quietly, deeply moved. He realized those difficult days had reshaped her far more than he had known. More confident. She was stronger now. The afternoon passed gently. More mature. Deep later brought her child and a basket of oranges to sit by the roadside. Life was never abundant, but it was honest. That evening, James visited John, their conversation practical. John's meal was simple. James noticed the change, not in appearance but in thought. John spoke slowly, thoughtfully. Later, James told Deep everything. They talked long into the night. Finally, Deep said softly that some people don't need pity. They decided to give John a small pickup truck. They need a real chance. When John saw the truck, he refused at first. Trust, not charity. But Deep told him gently, it was belief in his ability to live decently. John accepted with tears in his eyes. He promised not wealth, but dignity, and with that, his life slowly changed. Sometimes happiness doesn't come from what we own, but from helping someone stand again.